explain the organization of skeletal muscle, and we're going to be starting from the gross level, which means the entire muscle, and we're going to go in layer by layer until we reach the molecular level, which is the proteins that makes up the muscle. So you can see here it's a muscle, generic muscle. You can think of it as like the biceps, and what we will do is to cut it in a transverse plane, and we will be looking at the composition of the cross section of this muscle. So we're going to pull that out, and what you will see is this. Here we will have half the muscle visible now, and on this end you have the tendon, and tendon is basically what connects the muscle to the bones. And if you look at the surface of the muscle, it's going to actually be covered by a layer of connective tissue. And this layer of connective tissue shown in blue in the drawing is called the epimysium. Okay, so we're not going to color all of it because there are some other features that I want to show you that is beneath the epimysium. So we will put the name down first. Okay, so connective tissue that covers the entire muscle. Now, if you look at the cross sections of the muscle, what you will see is actually layers of additional connective tissue, and we will show them in pink here. And there would be many of these things. And what I can do now is I can pull out one of these things and enlarge it to show you the interior features. But for now is enough to say that this thing that I just pulled out is going to be covered by this pink connective tissue. And so if you peel back the epimysium here from the surface of the muscle, you actually will be staring right at the same pink layer that I've just colored. This pink layer is called the paramecium. Okay, paramecium. If I were to look inside a paramecium here, what you would notice is going to be a group of muscle cells. Okay, so these little circles, they represent the cross section of the muscle cells. Now, I do want to remind you that we are actually looking at the cross section of the muscle, and so these little circles represent a much bigger a cell. In fact, the cells is as long as the muscle itself sometimes, and each of these little circles represent a muscle cell, or we call them a muscle fiber. When you have a group of muscle fibers together, we call this whole thing a fascicle. Okay, so a fascicle is basically a bundle of muscle fiber. And again, one muscle fiber means one muscle cell. It's just a special name we give to muscle cell, just like we call a brain cells a neuron. So when you have a group of muscle fibers that is going to be surrounded by the paramecium, you get the fascicle. Okay, so what we've done here is pull out a fascicle, and of course you will see that you get the same structure inside, right? These are muscle fibers, muscle fibers, muscle fibers. All right, and I am going to pull one of these muscle fibers out, and we are going to enlarge it and look at what makes up the muscle fibers. Okay, but for now, let's take a look at the surface of the muscle fiber. They actually are going to be surrounded by yet another layer of connective tissue. Okay, and this connective tissue is going to be surrounding each and every single one of these muscle fibers. And so if you were to peel away the paramecium in the fascicle, you would be immediately looking at this green layer of connective tissue. And the name we give to this layer is called the endomysium. Alright, so just to quick recap, the epimysium surrounds the entire muscle, the paramecium surrounds a bundle of muscle cells, so creating the fascicle, and the individual muscle cells are surrounded by the endomysium. Alright, and if you take a look at this muscle cell right here, this black thing, let's label it first a muscle fiber, which means muscle cell. You will find all the regular features of a regular cell. So as you know, all cells are surrounded by the cell membrane, so the muscle fiber is no different. In fact, if you peel away the endomysium, you will be looking at the cell membrane of the muscle fibers immediately. But we give it a special name. Instead of calling it cell membrane, we call it the sarcolemma. Okay, it just means cell membrane for a muscle cell. And you will also find these circular openings on the surface of the sarcolemma. We'll come back to the function of these circles in a bit, but let's take a look at the inside of the muscle fiber. Now, the inside of a cell is called the cytoplasm, but again, we will give it a special name. We call it the sarcoplasm, okay, which means cytoplasm. And in the cytoplasm, in the sarcoplasm of our muscle fibers, you will find regular cellular components such as the mitochondria, the nucleus, and so on and so forth. And one special, unique organelles that you will find only in muscles are these long filaments that are called myofibrils. And so I'm drawing the cross section of these myofibrils that I'm talking about, and we're going to pull one out again to show you the unique features of it. And so this long thing here, this whole thing that I just pulled out from the cytoplasm of the muscle cell is called a myofibril. Okay, and it's made up of proteins. Each of the myofibrils are going to be responsible for creating contraction that allows your entire muscle to contract in the end. And surrounding each of the myofibrils are these webs of membranes. Okay, they are actually more like a net, but it's just easier for me to draw it as a shade. And they are actually called Sarcoplasmic Reticulum. Well, that sounds a lot like the endoplasmic reticulum that you've learned in a regular cell, and actually they are the same thing. And for now, just remember the sarcoplasmic reticulum, they contain calcium ion. All right, we will explain why that is important in another video, but that's enough to remember for now. Now, connecting all these sarcoplasmic reticulum together are these network of tubes, okay, that I'm showing here in orange. And these tubes, if I follow them, they are going to be traveling throughout the sarcoplasm. Eventually, they will lead to the opening at the top of the cell, at the surface of the sarcolemma. And so these holes that are found throughout the surface of the cell membrane, if I follow through, if I go into one of these holes, it will actually take me right into these tubes, and the tubes are called T-tubules, which would then be connected to the sarcoplasmic reticulum. Finally, if I were to remove the sarcoplasmic reticulum and just to look at the myofibrils themselves, let's make this a little longer. the myofibrils themselves are made up of repeating units that are connected end to end. Okay, and each of these repeating units are called sarcomere. And sarcomeres are often described as the contractile unit of muscle, which means the entire muscle is able to contract because at the molecular level the sarcomeres are contracting. And exactly how it contracts is going to be discussed later, but for now it's suffice to understand what makes up a sarcomere. Alright, so we have these thin proteins called actin, and they surround a much thicker protein called the myosin. Alright, let's draw a little bit more for the actin. There's more actin here. And so the myosin in the center, the thick filament in the center, they actually have heads on them. And during a contraction, what's going to happen is that the myosin head will grab on to the actin filament, and it will cause the sarcomere to shorten in this direction. So when each of the sarcomere shorten, ultimately that will cause the entire myofibril to become shorter, and the entire muscle cell is going to become shorter, causing the fascicle to become shorter and causing your entire muscle to become shorter, and therefore creating muscle contraction. And that's the organization of muscle from the growth level all the way to the protein level. I'm just going to quickly summarize this for you. What you can think of in terms of the structure when you're studying is this. You can think of the entire muscle, okay, and the entire muscle is going to be surrounded by the epimysium, and it's going to contain fascicle. Okay, then you can go in a layer deeper. If you think of the fascicle now, the fascicle is going to be surrounded by the paramecium, and it's going to contain the muscle fiber, which again means a single muscle cell. And if we continue to go in deeper, a muscle fiber is going to be surrounded by the endomysium, and a muscle fiber is going to contain these unique organelles called myofibril. And a myofibril, we are within the cell right now. The myofibrils are surrounded by the sarcoplasmic reticulum and these tubes called T-tubules. Okay, remember the sarcoplasmic reticulum is going to contain calcium. And the myofibrils, they themselves are made up of repeating units called sarcomere. So there you have it. If you have any question, please feel free to ask me during class or send me an email. Thank you for watching.